The world of coaching's come a long way in 20 years, and the worlds of science and academia are in agreement that it has much to offer across the corporate structure, not just in the boardroom, but all the way through an organization, top to bottom. California-based BetterUp is taking this to a new level, offering one-to-one mobile sessions on a grand scale, developing new behaviors and mindsets for thousands of clients around the world. I'm Andrew Wilson, and I'm in Davos to talk about the greatest untapped potential in any organization. It's people. Alexi, great to talk to you. First of all, we're talking about the world of work, and that's really changing and has changed. The old 40 years followed by a gold watch and a pension has gone.
Right.
And now we're looking at a new way of people relating to their jobs and to their employers. Where do you think organizations should be focusing now?
Great question. I think the biggest thing, as you outlined, is this change from the currency with my employer being constancy and loyalty to a world where we know from LinkedIn's research, the average job is now lasting and tenure of a job about 2 years. And so in that world, what we find is people are having to navigate new challenges, learn new skills. And so learning agility becomes this meta skill that is really critical as you think about all the digital disruption we're seeing, the new types of jobs that are existing in the past 5 years that just didn't exist 50 years before, and jobs that were here for 50 to 100 years that have disappeared in the last 5 years. So what we see in our work and as we partner with companies is folks are trying to focus their organizations and their people on being able to keep up with the pace of change and actually stay abreast or ahead of that change. And the skills there that become really important are things like resilience, things like emotional intelligence, and ability to cope with change and new experiences.
So the education system says it's running fast to produce those skills in the young people, but you've got people in the workplace already that need that kind of help.
Right.
And I guess that's where BetterUp steps in.
Absolutely, yes. So I think there's been a lot of good advancement in primary and secondary education to advance these skills. But if you look at most employers' assessment, and there's some wonderful research and organizations that do this, there's still a big gap between what we know are the most important skills for success today in the world of work, which are these things we just talked about, and where the average worker is on being measured against those skills. And so that's where BetterUp comes into play. We really help employers invest in their people, first as human beings and second as employees. And what we mean by that is understanding that your performance at work is actually a derivative of how well you're doing as a human being. So now instead of being command and control where 2 or 3 inspiring senior executives need to lead through the next century or the next 50 years, what you actually have is at the team level, you have frontline managers who are now expected to come up with novel new ideas and creations. And they're not equipped to do that in a traditional job world. And so BetterUp is partnering with companies to help support them from that skill development standpoint, but also from that values formation and that mindset shift into how do I drive those experiences.
I want to get onto the BetterUp model, but first of all, I just want to ask, so who needs help more, the companies or the employees? I mean, it's a two-directional crisis in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, when you break it down, the atomic unit of a company is its employees. There's not much left of a company when you remove the employees. And so what we find is the atomic unit of change is actually flipping the equation and focusing on helping companies by helping their people in alignment with the company's goals. And so most senior executives, when I talk to them, their challenge is they have a strategy or they have a goal they want to go meet, and they feel that their folks are either an accelerant or a decelerant to being able to capitalize that market opportunity.
Okay, tell me about the BetterUp model.
At BetterUp, we partner with organizations typically undergoing transformations. So we know companies across the globe are going from digital transformations to customer experience focused transformations. What we find is at the core of all those transformations is a new way of thinking and a new way of operating at work. And where we find that companies struggle is how they inculcate these new mindsets and these new skills and these new behaviors at every level of the organization. Organizations are looking for ways to democratize access to training and support that are measurable, they're data rich, and they're efficacious. And what we know from the research and what we know from our own experience is that executive coaching is one of the best ways to do this. The kernel of BetterUp is providing a way to democratize access to what we know really works. And that's a one-on-one relationship with a coach. To have someone who's an expert, who talks to hundreds of people in a similar situation in life as me, and can accumulate insight is critical. We know this from elite athletes, we know this from special forces operators in the military, and we know this from the world's top executives, that whether it's Eric Schmidt or Sheryl Sandberg, they will all swear to you the value of a coach.
So great, you've got a swim coach, it's a very personal relationship, they guide you through, they look at you, they care about your progress, you take off them from what they've got to say, and that relationship slowly builds. It's a very personal relationship. Yep. What you're doing at BetterUp is scaling that up so much that one might be forgiven for thinking that it's more like a supermarket for coaches rather than providing that personal service. How do you keep that coherence to the whole project?
We like to think about our mission, our goal as a company is to really provide this intimacy at scale. And what we find is the core of the experience is still that one-to-one relationship. In fact, this is where technology we think is an enabler and actually can help in a more personalized way. In my own experience, when I started shopping for a coach, it was a very lengthy process. It took me 9 months. It took me doing a lot of sessions with coaches, maybe 1 session or 2 sessions, a chemistry session to get a feeling. BetterUp, through a combination of our data analytics as well as artificial intelligence, gives you 3 matches, which we have a really strong statistical reason to believe are a successful fit for you, based on a host of everything from communication preference to personality to the types of issues and challenges you want to tackle with your coach.
Do you think then that this learning and development model is leaving behind the old model of the kind of the executive coach who goes to coach the CEO and turn him into just a meaner, more achieving man of the corporate world?
Absolutely. I do think there's an exciting change happening in the field of coaching. Historically, as you alluded to, about 50% of coaching was what we would call remedial coaching, where if you were a senior executive and you were assigned a coach, it could be, hey, you're doing great, we want to double down and have you do better. It could mean that you're generating a ton of revenue for the firm and we're not going to fire you, but you do that at an inordinate human cost, right? And people don't enjoy working with you. What we're seeing, and we're honored to be part of this revolution with BetterUp, is that coaching is following the evidence from strengths-based psychology and really becoming focused on how do I help great performers continue to double down on their strengths and perform better.
So final thought then, Alexi, where do we see the world of work going, all that we're learning along the way now? What's the next decade, 20 years got in store for us?
There's a ton of transformation and change happening in the world of work, but one area that we're particularly attuned to and focused on at BetterUp is related to investing in employees and investing in employees on these human skills and capabilities. And we know what employees want is they want to feel like they matter at work, they want to feel like they're growing. In fact, the highest rated need from employers is a sense of personal and professional development from their employer. So more than pay, more than better benefits, employees are looking to develop and grow as human beings first in the context at work. And employers who make that investment, who are able to really scale this personalized development, what they get is the lion's shares of the profit and the economic upside, which we know everything from a single act of exclusion on a team can damper team performance by 25%. At the same thing, we know that folks who feel that their work is meaningful are 50% more likely to get promoted, and they have much higher retention and firm loyalty metrics. And so what we see is these skills related to imagination, resilience, self-awareness, inclusion, belonging, cognitive agility emerge at the forefront of really what's going to drive economic impact and what's going to drive performance in the modern world.
Alexi, good talking to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Likewise. Thank you, Andrew.